Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am so honored to be joined by Jennie Milton. Jennie, welcome. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, Xander. Thank you so much for having me on the Epic Begins podcast. This is great. My name is Jennie Milton, but they actually call me Adrenogen because I've been into adrenaline sports all my life. So call me Adrenogen.
All righty. So Adrenogen, I totally get it. I love doing those adrenaline-inducing things, skydiving, bungee jumping, scuba diving. Tell us some of those epic adventures that you've been on.
Boy, Xander, I've had so many epic adventures in my life, and that's why I had to reach out for this podcast, because I love sharing some of my epic stories. But how about I start at the beginning and tell you sort of how I got into this lifestyle?
That would be great.
First. Fantastic. Well, I grew up in Canberra, Australia, which is actually the capital city, and I was one of the luckiest kids ever. My brother and I grew up with our parents who were entrepreneurs. They had their own business, and that business was a sports store.
Awesome.
I mean, nearly as good as growing up in a toy store, right? But we got to grow up doing all these different activities. My dad loved to ski in the winter time, so our sports store did sell ski gear. Yes, we have snow in Australia. For those of you who think it's only a beach country, we have snow in the winter time from June until October. So there's snow on the ground right now for all those keen skiers who want to go down to the southern hemisphere. And in the summer times, my dad loved to sail. He sailed before he got married, and when he had 2 kids, he taught us to sail as soon as he could. And as Michael and I got bigger, the boats got bigger and bigger and bigger too. So we went from like little dinghies on the lake to trailer sailors, and eventually ended up with like a 50-foot aluminium ketch that we would sail up and down the east coast of Australia. Out of sight of land. So it was really my dad who brought those epic adventures into my life at a young age.
Definitely. And that is great. Look, I grew up as a sailor, so I totally get that. I actually studied a semester at Macquarie University up outside of Sydney. So I love Australia.
Oh, cool. I'm glad you've been there and gotten to experience it, you know.
Well, I need to get back. There's a lot to experience, and I was studying, so I didn't get to see as much as I wanted.
Yeah. All of those people listening, if Australia's on your bucket list, shake the bucket and get it to move to the top.
Absolutely. So tell us a little about, I was looking at your profile. You've done a lot of mountaineering. Sometimes it didn't go quite as well for you. Perhaps there was a crevasse, I believe.
Oh boy, now we're diving into some epic and maybe scary stories. So as I mentioned, I grew up skiing from a young age, and the cool thing about skiing, it's such a great sport to teach us to build our skills, but also build our confidence step by step. I mean, you go to a ski resort and you start off on the green runs.
Yeah.
That's where they're pretty flat, but they're still scary when you're first starting. And then as you build up your confidence and your skills, once you can do a snowplow, then you go up to the blue runs.
Yeah.
And that's scary for the people who've just come off the green runs. But after a while, once you can control your speed, then you can go up to the black runs, and they get steeper. Now, maybe you don't know what comes after the black runs. I mean, some resorts have double black diamonds, but after that, you're into skiing, you're watching all the movies, and guess what? You want to go to Alaska and ski mountains like the one in my background here. In Alaska, the mountains are big, they're pointy, and it is the ultimate thing for a skier. Now, if you've got the fitness and the skills and you're into backcountry, you can hike to the top. But I didn't at first, and many of us don't. And so getting a helicopter to the top of these mountains was the ultimate dream that I had. And I think
Absolutely. Why walk when you can ride?
oh my gosh. I mean, heli skiing might sound expensive, but once you do it, you'll realize that you pay the money for the helicopter ride and the skiing's the bonus, really.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I'd, made a real dream, a dream that I'd seen in the movies come true. And I remember landing on top of that big pointy mountain and watching the helicopter fly away and just being in awe. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I've got
I
to
got to get
write
myself
down.
down.
I've got to get down. Now,
It seemed like a good idea down at the base, didn't it?
I like to say, be careful what we wish for, because it might just happen. And so at that point in time, I grew up a bit of a scaredy cat, right? So, I wasn't overcoming fear and doing scary things really didn't come naturally to me. And in the past, I'd let my primal fear response take over. And my natural reaction was flight. I always just wanted to run away. But once the helicopter took off and I'm on top of a mountain, there was no running away. I had to actually do it. And the guide had told me that he was going to ski down first, and then we all had radios. He was going to count us in when it was our turn. And I remember standing on the edge and him counting me down. Okay, Jennie, 3, 2, 1, dropping in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just have to go. And I think that counting down was actually something I use now in day-to-day life. If we're scared of doing something, just count ourselves down.
Yeah.
And then, ready, mindset, go.
Exactly.
Right? Get ready, get your mindset in place, and then just do it, because the reward is something you can't even predict sometimes. And I remember dropping into that mountain and being so scared, and then doing a couple of turns and the powder snow was flying over my head just like in the movies. And then my snowboard was too short, and it was designed for the mountains in Australia. And so the snow was deep, my board was too short, and I went over the handlebars and started tumbling, which to me at the time was like worst case scenario. But the universe gifted me an incredible moment where I actually ended up back on my board and kept going. It was like, whoa, what just happened? And if I'd been skiing, my skis probably would have come off and I would have had a yard sale, they call it, when you leave all your gear over the mountain. But I just kept going, and I got down to the bottom. And the other guys that I was riding with and my guide, Jerry, were like cheering. Yeah, maybe they thought I did that on purpose as a trick or something. And I just burst into tears, because that was such an emotional moment for me to overcome an extreme fear, make a dream come true, have something go wrong and it actually turned out okay. And that was a moment I will never, ever forget in my life. And then, you know what? The helicopter came and got us, and we got to do it again and again. And I was there for a whole week. And in that week, a few things happened. We had storms come in, and I realized that, it wasn't bluebird powder days every day.
Yeah.
You had to deal with weather and storms. But I remember a couple of days later, I was out with that same group of people, and I was with the same guide, and he gives you instructions at the top, and he'd said, okay, I'm going to go down and I want everybody to stay to the left of my tracks. I'm like, okay, I can follow that. And so he went down, the next guy went left of his tracks, the next guy went left of his tracks, and I was the third out of 4 people. And I remember coming down, going to the left of his tracks, and all of a sudden, the ground just dropped away from me, and I remember seeing this huge hole, and it was like, it went from white snow to like blue, darker blue, darker blue, darker blue, and black.
Oh, no.
And I realized that I was now over the top of what's called a crevasse, which is a hole in the glacier. It's where the ice kind of parts.
Yeah.
and it's a major danger there. And all of a sudden I'm over the top. Now, I threw myself to the side, and luckily I landed on the side of the hole, which was, again, a lucky situation. Thank you, universe. And I turned around to see the next guy coming down, who was a little bit further left of me. And I was waving my arms to warn him, but he was going too fast. And the next thing I know, I watched him go into the hole.
Oh,
He,
no.
I was close enough to the side where I got to throw myself, but he actually went right into the crevasse. And I'm first on scene. So that was the time where I was scared, super scared for him. And I started yelling, and I got on my radio and told, everybody what had happened. And my guide said, don't get too close to the edge. Right, because I had this natural response to want to get close to the edge so I could look down there,
Sure.
but I might have then fallen in. And so I just kept yelling the guy's name and hoping that I would get a response. And I got no response. The next thing I know, a helicopter flies over us and lands just above us. And a whole heap of guides got out. They had been it seemed like seconds, but I have no idea how long the time frame was. But they landed, they skied down. And that's when they started the crevasse rescue. And this was one of the first times that I'd ever seen the guides in action in a life or death situation. And it was just amazing. They were just like a team that worked so well together, and they had a plan, and everything just happened so smoothly. They weren't, exuding fear or swearing. They were just chatting with each other like it was another day on the job. It was really, really amazing to watch. And eventually they heard the guy yell back. They were able to lower the rope down to him. It was my job. I participated in the rescue. I was the anchor. I had to
Look at you.
sit on the backpack, right, to make sure that it didn't move, so that they had it part of an anchor.
Definitely.
And they were able to winch him up. We were all wearing harnesses, and he was coherent enough that he could attach the rope to his harness, and they pulled him up. And he got to the top, and they put him in the helicopter. And we found out later that, he'd broken his leg and pelvis, and his snowboard was broken in half. And he had landed on a shelf about 80 feet down.
Ooh.
And so he hadn't gone all the way to the bottom. Otherwise, I don't think, we could have gotten him out. So again, he got super lucky. I got to watch just an epic rescue.
Absolutely.
Real life. And it made me realize at that point that this is real life danger and things can go wrong. And I felt very ignorant. And I decided that it was time for me to go and do some training. I wanted to learn how to rescue people out of crevasses. If I was going to spend any time in these mountains, I needed to do my training. I needed to do avalanche training, first aid training, crevasse rescue training. And that's what I did.
Definitely. And I think that's really smart. I wanted to go back to something that you said, where you're like, you were standing, that first time you're on the edge and you're like, oh my God, I'm really scared. I totally get that. I put myself in those positions myself. And I remember when I was 12, I was at a camp, and we went to this quarry, and I got to jump off a 60-foot cliff into water. And remember, like, I'm standing on the edge and I want to do this, but I'm like, the heart is going so fast, and you're like, oh my God. And I'm like, okay, I'm going. No, I'm not going. Right. And there were so many things I was scared of and I'm sure you can relate to this, where you don't know because you don't know, but you learn so much in the mere seconds that something is happening, but it changes everything. So for me, I was like, well, what if I go too deep into the water and I can't get up? So I step off the cliff and I had this one thought in my head. And again, the whole thing is probably all of like 3 or 4 seconds that I'm actually falling, but everything seems to go slow. It's so clear where I was like, well, there's no turning back. Once gravity has you, can't do anything. When you were tumbling down the mountain, what are you going to do? Right? You can't do anything. Right. So anyway, I discovered that when you go into the water and you're going that fast, there's actually a lot of air around you. So it sort of slows you down. And I didn't go so deep I couldn't get up. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. Let me go back and do it again. Same thing with bungee jumping. I did when I was in Australia. I went to New Zealand after I got done studying. And I went specifically to go bungee jumping. I loved the rest of what I saw, but I went because I wanted to go bungee jumping. And I remember I got there, I was the first person of the day, and I'm like, let's go. They count me down. And I just went because I knew if I stood up on that plank too much, I wasn't going to go. And I wanted to.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, bungee jumping is like that dream that you're falling, but it happens again and again. It's awesome.
Yes, it is. And I've been to New Zealand to go bungee jumping too, Xander. That's definitely an activity that helps us expand our fear tolerance. We all have a fear tolerance and it can be very narrow. And it's only after doing some activities like bungee jumping, skydiving, maybe even going on a roller coaster, or maybe it's even something like just going live on your Facebook page that scares people so much, but it's only after doing it multiple times that your fear tolerance actually increases, and then you're able to feel more comfortable.
And then you discover that adrenaline rush is so much fun. And then you're like, I think I'd like a little more of that. And to this day, I love going on roller coasters. I love that feeling, that first hill and your stomach coming up. My older daughter loves it too. There are a couple of amusement rides at a park near us that one of them, we swear when we get off of it, we're like, all right, that's the last time I'm doing it. And yet we go back and we ride it again. Scares the bejesus out of me every time. But that adrenaline rush where you're perhaps a little shaky. They did an interview with me after the bungee jump, which was hilarious because I don't know what it's the adrenaline and my vocal cords. They're like, how was it? I'm like, oh my God, that was great. Like my voice was not my voice. And maybe you get this, but sort of you're buzzing so much that the hands are moving almost on their own. You're just like, I was like, oh my God, that was great. And, the hands were going everywhere. And I remember showing the video to my friends when I got back to college, and they were like, what is the matter with you? And I'm like, you have no idea, like, just how amped you are. I'm like, your body has to get rid of all of that adrenaline. So it's definitely. So what is the scariest thing that you've done? The most epically challenging thing? I know that's a hard one because you've done a lot.
That is a hard one, Xander. And, we're talking about adrenaline now. You're speaking my language.
I know. That's why I had you on. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about adrenaline.
And, adrenaline, and I love how you put that you fall in love with the feeling of that adrenaline rush. And it's nearly a drug that comes naturally in our body. And some people who really don't like the feeling of fear and they just know, I don't like feeling scared. I need to stop. I need to run away. It's the people who actually fall in love with the feeling of the adrenaline rush that is way more fun than the fear. And so we can't have one without the other. And sometimes people think, that you're just like a drug addict. You're just chasing that buzz, that adrenaline rush the whole time. But I want to remind myself included, I want to remind us that adrenaline is actually a natural response to a fear or to a situation that makes us more observant. It's like having a superpower. You become more observant, your hearing gets better, your observations get better.
Your mind is so clear, even though
so clear.
whatever's happening, like when I jumped off that cliff or when I did the bungee, I remember the whole bungee jump so clearly. It was, you
Yep.
know, gosh, it was like 30 years ago. In that whole time, and I describe it, it takes me 5 minutes to describe 4 seconds. But
That's
your mind is so wonderfully clear. You're right. Adrenaline gives us so
yep.
much. And it is, look, it's a primal, like our primitive brain, fight or flight response. And you're right. It is good. And I do agree that pushing ourselves and doing things that scare us are actually really important. There's so much growth that happens because we are all so much more capable of doing things. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love to do, I know you'd be shocked, is public speaking. I love it. That is it's not an adrenaline, it's an adrenaline rush, but not in the same kind of scare me way. And yet that's like 9 out of 10 people list public speaking as like one of their top 3 fears. And I'm like,
That's right.
I just don't get that. How could you not want to stand up in front of 5,000 people and talk to them? Oh my gosh, what a great day.
Yeah.
How can you
So
not
true.
go, wow, there is this really steep hill and I'm going to ride my bicycle down it and see how fast I go,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. So true, Xander. And, that's maybe one of the reasons why I got into public speaking. And I love speaking also because it does get my adrenaline going. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. That fear tolerance increases, like I said. But the bigger the stage, the more people in the audience, the longer the talk. I'm going to New York in 2 weeks. I mean, I've never been to a big city like New York. I'm normally in the big mountains or in the big waves, but now I'm going to the big city and I'm speaking at Columbia University on the stage there. And I know that it is going to be an adrenaline rush for
Absolutely.
sure, for sure. But let me tell you how I got into the adrenaline rush of speaking after being into sport, because you asked me what would be my scariest experience in
Yeah.
life. What was that epic, you know,
Yeah.
fear situation? And boy, I mean, I could tell you about being caught in an avalanche, right? I could tell you about being charged by a polar bear. I mean, how many people have been charged by a polar bear? And it got close. It was closer than a
Well, get
hundred
charged by
feet
a polar bear
feet
and
away.
get to talk about it. Yes, lots of
And
people
get to
have.
talk.
However, they're not here to talk about it.
That's right. But the scariest situation that I've been in was only 12 months ago, and it was after being diagnosed with brain aneurysms. And I didn't even know what a brain aneurysm was. I've been having headaches, and finally the test showed up I had these brain aneurysms. And what it is, for those people that don't know, is it's having too much blood pressure in the arteries, and maybe the brain artery walls are become weak and they start to bulge
Mm-hmm.
and into like a berry shape, or maybe they bulge all the way round. And that was my problem. That was what was causing the headaches. And 2 weeks after I was diagnosed, I had to go in for my first brain surgery. And the night before my brain surgery, I was in a hotel which was on the hospital grounds, and I had to get up at 5 a.m. to go in for pre-op prepping. I was so scared. And I realized that, I was scared because it was out of my control. I wasn't the one doing the surgery. I was putting my life in somebody else's hands. So I was giving up my control
Mm-hmm.
with a specialist. I may or may not survive. So all of a sudden, after feeling like a superhero and like nothing was ever going to stop me, all of a sudden something was stopping me and could stop me for good. And so, although I didn't have a fear of death, I just had a fear of change, a fear of what was my life going to look like, a
Right. I mean,
fear
a fear of what if I don't come out as
the
me
same way.
anymore? I'm alive. However, something
Yeah,
happens and I can't
that's right.
speak. The left side of my body doesn't work the same way. Whatever. Totally.
Yeah.
I get that.
And that's a very common thing. People, if your brain aneurysm ruptures, stroke is what happens, and
Yeah.
then the consequences are either death or a life with disabilities. And I remember being so scared, and I needed to calm myself down and make a plan. And so I needed to remember, what are all the tools that I use when I'm scared in the mountains that get me through, breathing, remembering to chant some positive affirmations. I be brave, I be strong, I be lucky, I be loved, I be grateful, I am the storm. That was what I chanted over and over again, and I was still chanting it when the anesthesia kicked in, and I went to sleep. And I remember waking up in ICU with just IVs in my arms, the
Oh,
beeping
sure.
of the machine next to me, and I woke up just so grateful to be alive. It was a very spiritual moment, Xander. It was very spiritual, and I realized that I'd been saved for a reason. I felt like I had now had a calling, and I'm into, mindset and motivation, and so I follow Tony Robbins religiously, right? And he'd spoken to me the week before and said, "Is there more knowledge in a graveyard or in a library?" And that question was going around in my head in that ICU. And I decided, because I'd survived this brain surgery, but I had another one booked for 2 weeks later. Was
Right.
I going to survive that one? And so I made the decision right then and there that I needed to share my stories. I needed to share my knowledge. I was a cocktail of all of these epic experiences of crevasse rescue and mountains and polar bears and the lessons that I'd learned in life, learning how to find courage, and once you find courage to overcome a fear, then the reward is confidence, and everybody's looking for that self-confidence in life. And this was my time to put my knowledge out there and share my stories to inspire others and to give them hope, because I'd been looking for stories. I wanted to find an athlete who had brain surgeries to repair their brain aneurysms, and they got back to a life that I could aspire to.
Sure.
And I was struggling to find those stories. And so I needed to be the one to do that, to write those stories, and also to help people overcome their fears. I mean, I thought my fear tolerance was so big until that night before my surgery, and I was so scared. And I thought to myself, how do people get through this fear if they haven't had all the fear training that I've had? And I felt, again, compelled to share my stories, my fear formulas, everything that I use to overcome my fears in extreme sports, so that I could, overcome the fears in my extreme challenges and then share that with others. And that is what has put me on the stage. It's now in 12 months. I'm about to have my third book published. So I am leaving my story in the library. I'm not taking it with me when my
Yeah.
time is up, Xander.
Absolutely. And I fully, embrace everything that you're saying. And I talk about it in my book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, that it's like, we all have epic things we want to do. Why not today start to go do those epic things? Because we are so much more capable. But when we have, and I call that falls under the epic unexpected. Something epic, but it's unexpected. I know a couple of years ago, I crashed on my mountain bike, shattered my shoulder, broke my humerus, walked a mile and a half out on a fractured pelvis. But the whole time, when I discovered like how hurt I was when I got to the hospital, I thought I dislocated my shoulder, which technically I had. It was just not in the way I thought. I dislocated it because I shattered the head of the humerus. So it wasn't located, but I had 2 surgeries on it. But the whole time, I knew that I would be okay. And I am a firm believer that the positive mindset, even when life is getting tough, the people who believe that they're going to be okay, you're like, I am going to be fine through the surgery. Yes, certainly. You have doubt. We're talking about your brain. There's so much that our brain does, and so much that we don't even know that our brain does that our brain does. But believing that you're going to be okay is so much better than I'm not going to be okay. I'm sure in your time you meet people who may be about the same age as you, and they somehow look and act 15 years older than they really are. And you're like, I don't get that. And part of that is if you believe you're old, you are old. I look at my mom. She's going to be 85 at the end of June. She just got back from doing a safari in the Pantanal in Brazil, which is the world's largest wetlands. There she is, 84, going for it. And she goes, I'm going as long as, I realize at some point I'm not going to be able to do this. So while I can, I will. And I'm like, right on, Mom, go for it. And people ask about my injuries. I'm sure in all of your extreme sports, you've had a few injuries. People are like, oh, are you bummed that you hurt yourself? I'm like, no, because I was being active. I would feel a lot worse if I had a heart attack as I sat on the couch. If I hurt myself because I'm out there living my life, having epic adventures, frankly, that's sometimes part of the price that we pay. I've got to run marathons. I've lost, toenails, had blisters. I got to run the 2014 Boston Marathon. I had a blister under my toenail. That really, really hurt. But that was my price to be able to run that epic race.
So true, Xander. And sometimes I also think that it's not necessarily always the price we pay, but it's actually a gift from the universe to go through an injury, or in my case, I went through the brain surgeries last year. I am so grateful that I had brain surgeries, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have started this journey as an author, as a speaker.
I shouldn't say the price we pay. We are participating, and we realize that there are things that are possible, and sometimes that possibility, what's possible, becomes a reality because we break a bone.
That's right. I told you that my brother and I grew up in the sports store. What I didn't tell you about my brother is that when he was 9 years old and I was 11, he actually got bone cancer and they had to amputate his leg.
Oh.
And that was a very traumatic time for my family. But again, I'm so grateful to have grown up with my brother setting the example of what's possible, because we created this MacGyver mindset to figure out how could we adapt the equipment so that Michael could do the sports that we were doing, and he and I would be doing them together. Skiing was pretty easy on one leg. A lot of people had done that before him, but he became the world's best one-legged skier. I mean, he had gold medals in the Paralympics for Australia. He holds the world speed skiing record for a person on one leg. He holds Guinness World Book of Records for the fastest marathon runner on crutches, because
Wow.
He doesn't wear an artificial leg. So my brother provided an example to me that anything is possible, and we all have disabilities, whether it's something big like having one leg, or whether it's the disability of maybe suffering from depression, or the disability of having some sort of thing that is holding us back. And my brother just showed me that anything is possible if we believe, and we just need to figure out the how, because we're all individuals. We all have a different makeup. We all have things we're good and we're bad at. And we just need to figure out how can we learn, or what do we need to do to achieve that particular thing. So, brothers and sisters are very competitive, and I had no excuses. And I remember skiing on one leg with my brother, rollerblading on one leg with my brother, and I taught Michael to snow kite one day. Now, snow kiting, for those of you who don't know, it's like kite surfing, but it's the winter version. We use those same big kites, but with our skis or snowboard on, and we get towed around on the mountains. That's what happens when you haven't got enough money for the helicopters anymore, Xander.
Exactly.
You either walk to the top or you learn to fly a kite, because that kite can tow you up the mountain. And I remember teaching my brother to snow kite one day, which was such a special moment for me, sharing the sport that I'm so passionate about, because
Sure.
snow kiting ended up being a combination of the skiing and the sailing. You put them together and you're essentially sailing on snow. And so
Definitely.
it's definitely one of my biggest passions. And I was teaching my brother to do it, and he was struggling a little bit. He was learning to fly the kite, and of course the power's on, the power's off, and it's very hard to balance,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
on one leg. And we were taking a break, and he says, "I don't know about this, Jen. I don't know if it's possible. Go on, show me. Do it on one leg." And so I took one of my skis off, and I've been snow kiting for 20 plus years, so I'm pretty good at it. And so I took off my ski, and I was snow kiting around on one leg and having a good time, demonstrating to my brother that it was totally possible. And as soon as he saw that me doing it, he's like, "Ha, give me that kite. You can't
Exactly.
give
I'm
me
not
that
letting my
kite."
sister beat me.
Exactly. And it was just, I have this incredible photo of my brother and I snow kiting together, both on one leg. And it was a very special moment for me.
That is great. Now, we're almost done, but I got to ask you this question because I ask most of my guests this question. I love the concept of not yet, right? There's so many things I want to do, some of them not yet. Doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. Maybe it's something I'm working on. It takes time writing a book. Is your book out? Not yet, right? So my question for you, Adrenaline is what are one or two of your not yets? Those things that you want to do, but you haven't yet.
Oh, I love that question. What a great one. I'm a not yet. You don't say no, you just say not yet.
Yeah.
I love that. And I'll give you two,
Okay.
right? So before my brain surgeries, I was actually booked to go to Greenland
Okay.
to snow kite the full length of Greenland,
Oh,
which
wow.
takes yeah, which takes a couple of weeks. You're camping out, you're towing a sled with all your gear. It was something that I had dreamed of, and I was doing it with a bunch of girls, and we were going to film a documentary. And then when I was diagnosed with my brain aneurysms, I had to put a stop to this. But it's become a not yet, because I'm now recovering from my brain surgeries, and my last angiogram, it's called. That's where they go up and take photos inside your brain. Everything's looking pretty good. And so I've got a lot of not yets that used to be go go goes, but I had to give up my sports for well over 12 months. And it's
Definitely.
like, am I ready to go kite surfing this afternoon? I'm nearly on the Oregon coast. And so, am I ready to go kite surfing this afternoon? And I can't actually give myself an answer until I get there. I need to check the conditions and decide, are there any red flags? Is it kind of mellow conditions?
Right. I
And
get that.
if the waves are too big or the wind's too strong, then I'm going to say not yet,
Yeah.
Xander.
There you
Maybe
go.
tomorrow. But I'm in this process of getting back into all of my activities, and it's been really, really important for me to listen to the human factor inside my head, because I know I can do those things, but is it good for me?
Yeah.
Am I going to do damage to my brain? And so I'm saying not yet a lot lately. And so
There you
I think
go.
that's a great lesson for all of us, to say not yet, or maybe just a little bit. Maybe I'll just
Exactly.
take that first step, right? Epic begins with the first step, and being celebrating that first step, not waiting until we've actually gotten to the summit of that mountain to celebrate. For me, just to go out there and just go to the beach and maybe fly my trainer kite, I'm going to celebrate, because there was a time only last year when I thought I may not be able to do any of these things
Right.
again. And,
Absolutely.
And so I think that's a good reminder. And Xander, you'll have to have me back on the podcast so I can talk about my crossing Greenland trip, because I want to turn that
Absolutely.
from a not yet to a hell yeah, I've done it.
Exactly. An epic adventure, let me tell you. I want to thank you so much, Jennie, for joining me today. Truly epic conversation, one that we're probably going to have a part 2 because there's so much adrenaline epicness to talk about. But in the meantime, if people can't get enough, they want more, how can they find you? Where are your books?
I would love people to reach out, please. If you've heard this podcast, send me a message and tell me if you enjoyed it. Tell me which was your favorite part of today's episode. Reach out to me on social media channels. You'll find me at Adrenogen, like Adrenaline Gen. You'll find I've got a YouTube channel, I've got Instagram, I've got Facebook, and I've got a website, adrenogen.com. And I've also created a new website, which is jenniemilton.com, that is promoting my speaking business. And you'll be able to find the links to my books there. Otherwise, check me out on Amazon. So please reach out, though. Please say hi. I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Well, Jennie, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I want to remind everyone that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, remember, epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.